Christina Caudill with Radiant Astrology, and this is your Aries New Moon Starcast for April 5th, 2019. So happy new moon. I'm actually recording this on the day of the Aries new moon. And I apologize because I usually like to get these out early, but I just came back from a trip from Europe, which those of you who follow my Instagram stories were taking on a little trip with me. And I'm still settling back in. And right now, this Aries new moon is really the perfect time to come back into alignment with our personal goals, our personal will, our personal intentions. And again, if you follow me on Instagram at Radiant Astro, you will see the suggested new moon in Aries intentions, which you can look at through your sun sign and rising sign. We are in Aries season, right? So we just recently had the Aries equinox, which in the northern hemisphere is the spring equinox. Just like here, I'm surrounded by beautiful cherry blossom trees, not in real life, but in the northern hemisphere, we are celebrating spring, a rebirth, which is very much in alignment with the symbolism of Aries. In the southern hemisphere, they are honoring the fall. And so, but when we look at the signification through the astrology, Aries brings us back to a sense of a fresh start, a new start. With so much fire, we can feel a sense of impulsiveness, a rushing, this rushing of this life force energy. It's a great time to be taking the initiative on projects, anything that helps you align with your sense of self, your sense of independence. And, no matter what your alignments in your astrology are, when it comes to this, selfness, self-centeredness, this is really me time. And there is such a thing as having a healthy ego, a healthy sense of self-centeredness, right? Because we're centering on what our personal needs are, our desires are, because Aries is ruled by Mars, the planet of desire. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But even before we get to the ruler of the new moon, which I really like to usually emphasize, what we really see in this chart of this new moon that is just unmistakable is the square from Saturn. Right? So Saturn, especially now that Saturn's in his rulership in Capricorn, is the ultimate taskmaster, right? So this Aries new moon is a time where we want to do something for ourselves. We want to take advantage of the momentum, but then Saturn is squaring this new moon, really kind of putting the brakes on. It's kind of like hold your horses or hold your fire, or, you have some kind of heavy responsibility or some block or something that's sort of creating this potentially sense of frustration. Whereas, the Aries fire is kind of like the sprint. The square from Saturn is kind of saying, it's bigger than just a sprint. You have more responsibilities, or maybe you just get a flat out no that you then have to continue to keep your own fire lit. That's why I call this Aries new moon sustaining courage. All the fire signs help us to align in a sense with our courage, with our inner fire. And with fire, it can be catch on easily, it can be quickly ignited, but then it can also quickly burn out. And the lesson of this Saturn square is, can we maintain that fire? Can we maintain the courage, the purpose, and the inspiration, or whatever it's taking for us to make it through this Saturn square? Because the square to Saturn is going to feel even more intense as the sun continues to come into that square with Saturn, which is exact April 10th, right? Because the new moon really is a starting point for a cycle. So this first part of the cycle is really going to call on us to balance both our fire and our sense of self-mastery, our sense of responsibility. And, at times it can feel like the teenager who wants to get out there and make his mark, but then, the parental figure saying, oh no, you can't do it that way. Or you have homework to do, or, you've got some other responsibilities. So it's not just full on, give me what I want. It's how can we integrate a sense of discipline, a sense of maturity while maintaining that fire, not letting that heavy Saturn quench our fire or put out our fire. Because, this is a really special time of year where we're starting a new cycle of the cosmic year, just had the equinox. So we want to still maintain that enthusiasm and that momentum, right? And when I think back to the beginning of the year, January 1st this year, look back at that time, because it was a similar kind of energetic urges happening, whereas Mars had just entered Aries, and that is, that's Mars, the driver, in Aries, the sign of rulership. But then we also had Saturn conjunct the Sun in Capricorn, which was like, okay, this isn't going to just take about enthusiasm. This is also about responsibility, about rising to the occasion, maybe even taking on more responsibility than usual. And I look back at that time and I'm feeling a little bit of an echo there, that I think it was the astrologer, Rick Levine, who'd said something about you can't just sprint up, the Mount Kilimanjaro because you'd probably kill yourself or you probably pass out. It takes a sustained effort, right? So whereas the fire is great for initiation, we want to continue to have this sustained effort, knowing that Saturn does bring rewards if we listen to the Saturn lessons of discipline and patience. All right, so we've talked enough about the Saturn squaring the new moon. Now let's look at Mars. Mars rules this new moon. And Mars, I'm actually very happy that Mars has finally gotten out of Taurus, because Mars and Taurus can be kind of like a slog, because Taurus is this earth sign, and the shadow of Taurus can be stuckness. So we can kind of feel like, it's harder to get things done, harder to get what we want. It can feel sort of like a slog. And also Mars and Taurus can procrastinate, or can, have a harder time just getting that get up and go. Although Mars and Taurus can actually go the distance, but it tends to be this sort of slower type of drive. Now, Mars has recently moved into Gemini as of last week, and I personally have Mars in Gemini. And so if Mars is our ability to get things done, to get what we want, to go for things, then in Gemini, this is an air sign, right? So he's a little more free, a little more free to move about. And in Gemini is a sign of the twins. It's two or multiples of two. So he's more free to sort of explore different things, to multitask. We just want to be careful of spreading ourselves too thin so that we don't actually get any one thing done or get any one thing done well. This is where the Saturn influence can be helpful, because, as much as we want to spread ourselves thin, it's important that we focus our energy. Even if we focus it on just limit it to two things, right? We want to be able to know that we can move forward, get things done, and do so in a way where we maintain our momentum, because this is a really great time, as I said, that we want to align with that momentum that's sort of behind our back, this fresh new start in every area of our lives, really. And so with Saturn, Now, with Mars in this sign of Gemini, this air sign, I like to call it like running with scissors, right? Because Mars can want to move fast, get a lot of things done. And Mars is very sharp, though, right? Mars can be about sharp objects. And in Gemini is a sign of communication, a sign of the mind. Our mind can be sharp, it can be quick, but so can our tongue, so can our maybe we might even be accidentally like lashing out or easily triggered, because Mars does symbolize that sort of anger impulse, any kind of impulse, that just comes from this sudden impulse, a sudden instinct, fight or flight. Mars in Gemini can make it easier to be triggered. So we want to watch out for that triggered nature within us. And Mars is just coming out of a sextile with Chiron, the wounded healer. And ultimately, Chiron can help us come back to our wholeness and can find healing. But with Mars there, that can be tricky. Maybe there have been some wounding words, and they may or may not be intentional. It could just be that we're moving so fast, we accidentally, hurt people's feelings. Or it could be also that with Chiron newly in Aries, finding his courage to be independent, to individuate. Sometimes maybe we do need to say things that might be wounding to others, but that actually shows our sense of individuation, our sense of individuality and ourself, our personal goals. So we just want to watch with these communication mishaps. We're out of Mercury retrograde. I mean, we're still in the post shadow, but it can be easy to feel wounded or to wound others, with all this Martian energy. So while our sense of instinct is in this scattered realm of Gemini, we want to make sure that we call back our centeredness, especially this coming week, because the sun is coming up to a couple of very profound squares. So it's going to square Saturn in Capricorn, as I said before, April 10th, and Saturn is that taskmaster. It is Lord Karma. Right. And so any kind of square can be very creative. It can push us to create. It can help us to gain more mastery. But it usually calls for a slowing down when it's a square with Saturn, some kind of slowing down, need for patience, need for depth and quality. And soon after, on April 13th, the sun will come to square Pluto. Powerful Pluto, intense, relentless Pluto in Capricorn. Now, on the world stage, we most likely will be seeing some expressions of these power struggles even more intensified that we've been seeing them, right? Because we tend to see it in the collective quite clearly, especially with the South Node here, right in there with Pluto and Saturn, which is about the collective past karma, something from the past coming through that needs to be resolved. And in Capricorn, a lot of times it has to do with control and with power struggles. And in our own lives, depending on what we have around the late degrees of the cardinal signs, we likely will see this sense of our own empowerment, our own central focus of our lives. That is the sun. How is the sun going to emerge transformed from these intense squares of Pluto and Saturn? And now in Aries, and also in Capricorn, these are cardinal signs. So these are the signs that want to initiate a new phase, initiate a new beginning. So this is really a sense of a true initiation. And so it's going to take our real sense of courage, again, that sustained courage, beyond just the, okay, let me try it once and give it all I got. And, oh, I failed. Okay, so that was worthless. Actually, no, what we want to do is have a goal that is worthwhile and worthwhile pushing through, worthwhile maybe even taking any criticism that comes our way and taking the gold from it and becoming better, becoming a better version of ourselves, letting go of what is not necessary and focusing on what is the most necessary for us to grow, to become stronger in our character, right? Ultimately, that's what the sun represents, our character, our vitality. At times, our own vitality can feel a bit dimmed and diminished when we are being squared by Saturn and Pluto. So really take excellent self-care, take time to rest, learn to rest, not to give up. And just know that we are going through another initiation phase over this next couple of weeks, because then around April 18th, 19th is the peak of this cycle, which is another full moon in Libra. And so this is the second full moon in Libra we'll have in a row, which makes it a true blue moon. They say once in a blue moon, they don't come around that much. And so if you look back to the last full moon in Libra, which was around the equinox, around March, I think 21st or so, where was the sense of cooperation really coming up in your life? I know for me, my husband and I were on this trip to Europe, and we had two totally different goals. We're actually going to two totally different countries, and we had to compromise. We did a lot of compromising. It was fun, though. I mean, it was a vacation, but compromise was the name of the game. And so when we come into the second full moon in Libra, which I'll have another video on that shortly when we get closer to that time, we want to look at how can we compromise and cooperate where we're not overly compromising ourselves and our goals and our will. And in order to know where we're over compromising, we actually have to know what we want. And that is this Aries new moon is really getting us in alignment with what lights our fire and what actually motivates us. And, the other interesting sort of synchronicity that's happening now too is Vesta, the goddess of our sacred fire. The goddess of our home and hearth and our sacred purpose. She has just shifted into Aries as well. And so when we look at the asteroid symbol for Vesta, it's a chevron with a flame coming out from the center of it. And that actually is very symbolic of our sacred fire, our sexual fire, our inner motivation to really focus our entire psychic energy on something that is sacred. And so we're having this at the same time as all this, Aries new moon, new beginnings that are really going to be tested. We will be tested in some ways with how can we deepen into our purpose, and how can we still maintain that motivation and that enthusiasm, even in the face of these tests, whether they be criticism, whether they be burdens or responsibilities, whether they just be a no that sometimes we get from Saturn. But if we have a purpose, something that's meaningful to us, then we can continue on that path and know that it just takes getting more clear and more confident on where we're going, right? So this sounds like a very powerful cycle that we're just beginning now. And so I will see you back here at the Libra full moon, where we can see how far we've come in this cycle. Make sure that you're subscribed to my e-newsletter at radiantastrology.com, where you will get my new moon and full moon reports. And also follow me on Instagram at Radiant Astro, where I'll be sharing daily astro reports and starcasts, and I can't wait to see you there. And I wish you a very beautiful, magical, and inspired Aries new moon.